Please welcome Donald Bolger, Associate Professor of Human Development and Director, Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity.
Once you learn to read, you will forever be free. These are the words of the great Frederick Douglass. You see, the written word spread ideas that freed a people from bondage. It freed them and gave them the knowledge to propel them to economic and political freedom. But you see, the written word also freed Homo sapiens from the shackles of oral language, from the limitations of the human brain and its capacity for memory and perspective. You see, the written word and written language, it transcends time and space. It allows us to listen to our ancestors, to speak to the future, to learn from those who are oceans apart, and in doing so, learn new ideas beyond the present moment. In this vast digital age, we take this for granted. You see, those written words these days, they get translated into bits of information and they fly across the globe in microseconds and land in these ubiquitous devices that we hold in our hands every single day. So what is the problem? The literacy activist Kareem Weaver said, "Imagine being in the Stone Age, you ain't got no stone. Imagine being Noah, and you don't have an ark." Not being literate, fully literate, means being unable to harness the wealth of information, much less tread water amidst the tidal wave that comes at us daily. 5,000 articles in our newspapers, 6,000 books each day, 7.5 million blog posts. This is the fate of so many of our children in schools today, and over 20% of adults as well. What is this medicine that I'm taking? What are these forms that I'm filling? What am I signing on to? Illiteracy costs millions. Those who are illiterate pay nearly twice as much for healthcare and live a third as long. It costs billions in lost wages and revenues. Those who are illiterate, there's a high rate of unemployment or underemployment, incarceration. It costs us roughly $30 billion annually, $1.2 trillion globally. The ocean is rising and it's not taking us all equally. You see, with rising rates of poverty amongst our school-age children, along with the gap between rich and poor, access to literacy is also being limited. Literacy is complex. Reading and writing are modes of communication. They're social by nature, but that doesn't mean that they come naturally. You see, with the written language and the invention of written language is so recent in our evolutionary history, only about 6,000 years ago. As of 1900, only 20% of the population was literate, of the global population. And in 1976, only 67% of the population was literate. Now, today, it's around 87%. So there is no gene that codes for this great, audacious cognitive skill that we've invented. But it is brain science. Which brings me to my work. I spent the better part of 30 years in academia understanding how is it that children learn to read, and why is it that some fail to? I began this journey in Western Massachusetts, working with children who had learning difficulties, also known as dyslexia. My first child that I worked with was a 13-year-old boy, a hockey player. And he was reading at below a fourth grade reading level, what we would consider functionally illiterate. When I spoke to his parents, they said, the light is going out in his eyes. I could see it. He had that dark, sullen look, desperate, depressed, sad. So we worked week after week, decoding words and sentences, getting faster and more accurate. After 13 weeks, I could see the light was coming back on. After about 6 months, he was reading close to grade level. And he went back to a general ed classroom in a mainstream school. His life had changed, and so had mine. I had to understand, the brain is plastic. We learn, it grows. How does that happen? So over the past 25 years, my colleagues and I have investigated the effects of those interventions, that instruction, that explicit systematic instruction. And we found that it changes the brain's circuitry. It rewires it. It grows. We've also investigated how we make meaning of these words and these sentences and these stories from infancy. The former past president of the Maryland NAACP, Willie Flowers, said to me, literacy starts in the womb and grows in the communities. It was a great comment. It starts with those words and the stories shared in the languages and the dialects that color the fabric of our society. Evidence from my research shows that when those children are listening to those stories, they're activating those lived experiences in their brains, creating a mental image, hearing the sounds, seeing the sights, smelling the smells. When you read or hear kicking, picking, licking, you literally have those motor neurons for kicking, picking, and licking being activated. Over the past 5 years, my team and I have taken on a grand challenge. How do we translate this vast body of knowledge to those tasked with educating a future society, our teachers? We know from the principles of learning science that key to that is that modeling and scaffolding of knowledge and skills. It builds on the brain's mirror neuron system that allows us to imitate. It's our first learning mechanisms. We imitate the lip movements when babbling, the thoughts that we form, the questions that we ask. But we also acknowledge in working with our educators, like my wife, who say that often heard refrain, all children learn differently. They differ in their lived experiences. They differ in their curiosities, their imagination. And they differ in the way that they communicate. They come to our schools using those languages that they're loved in and those dialects that they're loved in. And from those stories that they hear and that knowledge that they're shared, they've built value in their own lives and the lives of their families and communities. And so that art of teaching is being able to scaffold and model for our children, to be able to interact that imitating network, but also to reach the children where they're at, to see their knowledge and their lived experience. It's a dance. And whether they're successful and whether those children will learn will depend on whether that child feels like this is a model to imitate and accepts it, or whether that child rejects it or feels rejected by it. So to close, I'll say that as a neuroscientist, right? We have learned those great principles that we need in order to teach children how to read and write. But in working along our educators and our children, we also understand that in order to teach and in order for those children to learn, we need to honor the experiences and meet those children and see their knowledge and their capacities. Thank you.